Good afternoon and welcome to our UpSkill Works Forum series, where we engage the business community and community leaders, policymakers, and leading thinkers on key workforce issues our region and our nation confront. I'm Peter Beard, and I lead the Greater Houston Partnerships UpSkill Houston initiative that partners with employers, educational leadership, and community-based organizations to strengthen the talent pipeline our region's employers need and to help Houstonians connect to good jobs that increase opportunity and prosperity. And now just a few housekeeping details. All attendees are muted and your videos are turned off for the entirety of the webinar. Please do not use the chat function for Q&A. This will not be moderated for questions. The chat function should be used to connect with our production team if you're having any issues. If you have any questions for Joe Fuller, you should use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. This will be moderated throughout today's session. I'd also like to acknowledge the sponsors of the 2021 UpSkill Works Forum series: Accenture, Silver Eagle Distributors, Winstead PC, HCA Houston Healthcare, Houston Community College, Lone Star College, the Merrick family of companies, Mustang Cat, San Jacinto College, the Western Governors University, WGU Texas. I'd like to thank our sponsors for your support for this UpSkill Works Forum series. In advance, I would also like to thank Accenture and Aon for providing leadership in Houston and in the United States on today's very important topic around apprenticeships. I'd now like to introduce Mary Beth Gracy, who will be introducing our speaker, Joe Fuller, and she will be moderating today's discussion. Mary Beth serves as the Office Managing Director of Accenture's Houston office with more than 2,000 employees. Accenture is a global consulting firm that provides technology, business, and management consulting. During her 30-year career with Accenture, Mary Beth has advised a wide range of energy companies from upstream to downstream on driving innovation and shaping effective long-term strategies. She's also a member of the board of directors for the Greater Houston Partnership and Genesis Works Houston. Later in the webinar, we'll be joined by Dawn Spreeman-Heine, who is the Managing Director of Commercial Risk Solutions for Aon here in Houston. Aon is a global financial services company that sells a range of financial risk mitigation products, including insurance, pension administration, and health insurance plans. Dawn will share an exciting opportunity for companies in Houston who want to jumpstart their apprenticeship programs. But first, Mary Beth, it's a pleasure to have you here today, and the partnership appreciates your leadership and Accenture's support for this UpSkill Works Forum.
Thank you, Peter. Accenture is proud to partner with UpSkill Houston and support these virtual sessions on the important workforce topics in the Houston region. And today we're going to be discussing the important role that apprenticeships can play for businesses that are seeking skilled talent that's developed to their specifications. And we're going to ground this conversation in the insights from the report Room to Grow, Identifying New Frontiers for Apprenticeships, which was an important and groundbreaking report published by the Harvard Business School and Burning Glass Technologies. And we're especially fortunate today to have with us one of its authors, and also a good friend of UpSkill Houston and Accenture, Joseph Fuller. Joe has a very distinguished background. We're happy to have him here today. His day job, he's the professor of management practice and general management at Harvard Business School and co-leads the school's initiative, Managing the Future of Work. He's a 1981 graduate of HBS himself. He was the founder, a founder and the first employee of the global consulting firm Monitor Group, which is now Monitor Deloitte. He served as its CEO for its commercial consulting operations until 2006. And in his 3 decades of consulting, he worked with senior executives on a wide range of issues related to corporate strategy and national competitiveness. So he certainly understands the context that we're talking. So welcome, Joe. This is sure to be a great and insightful conversation, and we're very pleased to have you here today. Before we get started with questions, I'll just do the reminder that This is intended to be a conversation where we want to take your questions as well, and you use the Q&A tab rather than the chat function. I'll be monitoring that and asking Joe questions as we go along. But of course, I'm starting off with my own set of questions related to the report. But before we get into that, maybe just a softball question for you. Can you tell us about the mission and work of the Managing the Future of Work initiative itself?
Well, happy to, and thank you for having me, Mary Beth. We started the Managing the Future of Work project when I joined the faculty about 10 years ago at Harvard Business School as a subset of a broader project we were doing on US competitiveness. And one of the data that jumped out at us from that analysis was that the Harvard Business School alumni who we'd been surveying felt that the skills base of the United States had been a historical source of competitive advantage for the country, but that it was waning and waning quickly. And strangely, none of my colleagues here at HBS had started to pursue that. I did start to pursue it almost upon my arrival here, in part because I knew my consulting clients were also very concerned about it. So my personal experience allowed me to validate what we were seeing in the data. Now, if I'd known how complicated it all was, I would have picked something simple like cold fusion or Middle East peace or something. But what we gradually emerged as our own project because it became such a big part of the US competitiveness project. And we defined our mandate as looking at the skills issue and employability and the evolution of work really through two lenses. The first was from the demand side. If you look at a lot of academic research in the area, it's very supply side oriented, and companies and even policymakers are often almost abstractions or variables in somebody's equation. And the second thing we wanted to do, in maybe an expression of some institutional hubris, is that we wanted to look at it broadly, to be able to say to an executive, here are the half dozen phenomena you have to be familiar with. So certainly skills and the skills gap was first among equals, but also skilled immigration, the interplay between the unit costs of labor and technology and how they feed off each other, the care economy. So how do caregiving obligations and family concerns affect productivity, career paths, employability, workforce participation? Another one would be increasing area of focus for us is the gig economy. Gig economy has been a very dynamic force in the United States, but most decision makers, particularly on the policy side, hear gig and they think Uber. They hear gig and they think DoorDash, and those are legitimate big companies. But the fastest growing part of the gig economy are people who are making more than $100,000 a year through gig work. It's everyone from web designers to data scientists to people who've got 7 cars driving Uber. So we're really trying to give decision makers the ability to look across all the various variables that are affecting their workforce and the evolution of work. And that's led us to, we have about 180 podcasts up on our HBS Managing the Future of Work website. We publish white papers, usually 2 or 3 every year, several coming out toward the end of this year. We have an elective course in our MBA program. We have an executive education program course. So it's become pretty ambitious and self-sustaining.
I've spent some time on the website, and it does have, tons of great information, and would recommend that to anybody. 3 of the things that sort of stood out for me in our discussion today that is being addressed by the Future of Work initiative are, starting off really with the skills, like you talked about. What is that demand? Those that are needed, how can we develop them? The secondly is, what are the roles that employers play to invest in this existing and emerging workforce. And then finally, kind of the talent development, thinking about that as a concept in and of itself, because as the pace of change is accelerating, we've had disruption to our traditional approaches for developing talent as well as acquiring talent. And certainly this past year has shown us how disrupted that can be. So if we think about, kind of turn it to the Room to Grow report itself, you spent time identifying those key and distinguishing characteristics for the occupations that would be appropriate for an apprenticeship.
Yep.
And that framework helped you then identify other occupations that either expand or boost that potential for apprenticeships.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk to us a little bit about what you found as those key criteria for occupations and role?
Well, there are several. The first is that it's a couple of obvious ones. It cannot be a job that's subject to widespread certification or credentialing imposed by states. One of the big impediments we have to mobility of labor in the United States is that if you're a barber or a beautician or a nail technician, fingernail technician, or in many states, all sorts of other professions, there are discrete, separate training requirements by state. So we wanted to look at things which weren't already being governed by this mosaic of state regulations. Second is that the jobs had to really require expertise in 4, 5, 6 things, and things that were teachable. So they had to have a fairly high, what we call hard skills quotient, but a capped number of them. Because that if you start getting a job that has 15, 20, 25 different requirements, you really drifted into a job classification that's called a non-routine job, a cognitive non-routine job. And while those can be great jobs, they just don't lend themselves to the apprenticeship model. And we wanted to look at jobs that did not have very high quotients of what are thought of as social skills or soft skills. We didn't exclude those, but we wanted jobs where the hard skills were a significant part of the value add an employee could bring. And there are 27 jobs in the United States that are very strongly influenced by apprenticeship programs. They're almost all in the skilled trades. So a pipe fitter or a welder or a roofer almost invariably has gone through an apprenticeship program in certain states. And we found that there were almost 74, actually almost 3 times as many jobs that could be done, could be very effectively staffed through an apprenticeship approach, constituting about 3.3 million jobs in total. That's 8 times the number of apprentices we had in 2017, 2018 when we did the analysis. So we can have a major expansion of this through 2 mechanisms. The first was deepening the penetration of apprenticeship in the jobs that already rely on apprentices in different jurisdictions and industries, but also, as you mentioned, adding both an expander category, other jobs kind of similar to those that are not currently the subject of apprenticeships on a widespread basis. That'd be things like solar panel installers or numerical controlled machinists, but also things like logistics clerks and data entry people. And then a final category called boosters, which are not jobs that are so similar to the core, but where there's a lot of evidence that the skills profile that I described fits. And there's lots of evidence in markets like Europe that sophisticated global companies use an apprenticeship approach to staff those types of jobs. That's jobs like claims adjusters or graphic designers and things like that. So a lot of opportunity to expand the model if we have the will to do so.
Interesting. Yeah, so that's kind of key takeaways from that are that sort of narrow set of skills, things that are teachable. Yeah, that was interesting. I'm curious, how do you think about the jobs that, again, are appropriate for apprenticeships in terms of what the wage profile should be? And then I'm curious, what do you, if we then think about apprenticeships as an earning while you're learning, what is sort of that base education level that, again, becomes appropriate for apprentice in terms of I'm going to teach the rest of the skills on the job?
Yep. Well, apprenticeship is a major category of a broader set of work-based learning programs. And while apprenticeship is a great model, and one that states can get their heads around, the federal government, of course, is a federally registered apprenticeship program, we don't want to use it as synonymous with work-based learning. Work-based learning, writ broad, is, in my estimation, really the gold standard that we ought to be aspiring to for many more aspiring young workers in the United States. And why do I say that? Well, the first is that when we get a young person in a compensated work-based learning setting, and there's going to be a 10th grader, it can be an 11th grader. We're not talking about necessarily community college students or someone in their early or mid-20s. It does so much for them. The first thing it does is answer a question that many high schoolers have been asking themselves since high school started getting invented in the United States in the 1880s and 90s as an expression of competition between local towns that were trying to attract investment. And that is, what the heck am I doing here? Why am I studying all this stuff? And when you've got a 10th grader who suddenly is hearing and seeing that because I go to high school, I now can work in this setting. So it may be something that I already had an interest in. Let's say it's a vocational ed program related to carpentry or auto repair, truck repair. And I'm getting paid. And what am I hearing from this company that's paying me and putting money in my pocket? Here, I have to complete high school. I have to keep my grades up. I can't get in trouble with the law. And now I have a clear line of sight between going to algebra class or going to English class and my future, as opposed to I'm simply sitting here trying to wait my way through the period because I'm bored and it doesn't interest me. A second thing it does is it allows kids to start developing the critical social skills or professional skills, power skills that they need to be a success. And this is really important as the workforce is evolving. As my colleague here at Harvard, Dave Deming, has shown, the jobs that are growing in the United States and are growing in compensation in the United States at a higher than average rate are jobs that have a high social skills requirement. Now, what do I mean by that? That isn't the life of the party, has the best one-liner, best golfer, or whatever else. That is someone who's got some aptitude in dealing with others. They've got some EQ. They're not frightened to deal with a stranger. They're attentive listeners. They know when to listen and when to speak, or at least I won't try to con you. I just probably misdescribed most men on the planet, but they know in settings, and they're cued into it, so they're influenceable on that. They can go into a work group that's not familiar with them and be productive. And where do you get that in your life? We don't teach it in elementary school. It's a very hard thing to teach you. You learn it through social interactions. And when a young person goes into an apprenticeship or work-based learning environment, they're just drinking all of this in. What does it mean to have a job? How do I dress? When do I have to show up? When do I ask a question? Is it okay to ask a coworker something, or do I have to go to my boss? And that all seems very elementary to all of us who both maybe grew up in households where one or both parents worked outside the homes, whose siblings worked outside the home, who had summer jobs, who had internships in high school or college. This other thing is, the adults in the setting, in the workplace, they don't expect a 10th grader or an 11th grader to know. But when they hire somebody in a full-time position for a full wage, let's say out of a college or a community college or out of high school, they want that person to be productive. And the type of soft skills deficit that many young aspiring workers have due to a lack of exposure and experience are viewed actually as deficient performance. And if you look at why most middle skilled workers lose their jobs involuntarily, leave their jobs involuntarily, the number one explanation is not a hard skill deficit, it's a soft skills deficit. So when we get a work-based learning opportunity for a young person, we're addressing multiple problems. We're increasing the odds that they stay in school, that they apply themselves in school. We're showing them that there's a clear line of sight to a decent quality of life, and we're helping backfill what often for them is an experiential learning deficit, which is how does this all work and how do I interact with people in a professional environment, not in a home environment, a neighborhood environment, a place of worship environment, or a school environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very interesting, and it rings true with some of the things that I've seen with apprentices that we have had in our Accenture group. And so that's very, it's very compelling about the good things about apprenticeship, but we still had struggles, particularly in the United States, with sort of the uptake of the apprenticeship model. So clearly there's some myths or misperceptions about it out there, probably both from the perspective of the employer and also from the perspective of the worker or the potential apprentice. So, what are some of those, and how do you think we overcome them?
On the worker side, I think, Mary Beth, there is an issue, and I'm sure many people in the audience are well aware of this, that over time in the United States, we've tended through perfectly benign intentions to discredit certain forms of work. If you listen to anyone from political leader to high-profile athlete or entertainer, social leader, what do you hear again and again and again? Got to go to college to make it in America. Got to go to college to make it in America. Well, 40% of today's 18-year-olds are eventually going to get some type of post-secondary degree. And we're immediately signaling 60% of those learners, but more like 75% of African Americans and 80% of Hispanic Americans, well, you didn't go to college, you fill in the blank. You're a loser. And we simultaneous in that, the notion of your kid or your kid brother or sister or your nephew or niece or your student aspiring to be someone that repairs truck diesel engines or is a plumber has been simultaneously been discredited. Now, if you go to someone and say, well, gee, is it beneath someone's dignity to do that? Of course not. But in terms of the ambient messages we send, we've discouraged people from pursuing those career paths. And this has also been hurt by a couple of things in the United States. One is that vocational education really atrophied and shrank back to very low profile roles. Now, there are some really important and valid reasons for that. In a lot of school districts, voc ed was used for tracking and for segregation. But hopefully we're over that now as a society and and in politics in most locales. And the fact that we don't introduce voc ed to more kids early, and that counseling on things like careers and how to get a decent paying job has been completely overwhelmed in most school districts, where the counseling budgets are low and the available counselors are invariably dealing with issues of substance abuse, pregnancy, involvement in the criminal justice system, inadequate performance on standardized tests. And yes, there's still those great people out there doing the Lord's work at counseling individual kids they know, but it's not systemic and it's not organized. So on that side of the equation, we haven't done a great job publicizing that you can get a great job that pays very well, where you've got a solid future that isn't associated with a college degree and is associated with a practical skill. From an employer's point of view, there are several phenomena. First of all, employers generally equate apprenticeship, particularly in right-to-work states, as a potential stalking horse for union organization. In part, that's because many of the building trades are heavily unionized, and in part, it's because the Department of Labor administers apprenticeships at a federal level, and the Department of Labor, if you look at their activities, it's a 90% enforcement agency, things like OSHA. So employers say, let me get this straight. I'm supposed to start an apprenticeship program, which I fear is going to lead to a unionizing effort at my shop, and I'm going to invite an agency in here that looks for reasons to correct me or fine me or regulate me in some additional way or in a more heavy-handed way. No thanks. I think also that to date, historically, we had kind of a perverse impact of the automation of recruiting in the United States using platforms like the Indeeds and the Manpowers and the Monster.coms. You know, those are great technologies, and I think those companies do a fine job. I don't mean to be criticizing them at all. But essentially, the whole process has gotten rather impersonal. So what I'm supposed to do as an employer is post a job, and somebody who's qualified is supposed to apply, and then I interview them. And that's kind of caused us to let muscles about owning the development of what in my writing I call talent management pipelines, where you cultivate a source of talent, and you, through things like apprenticeship, you're building a skilled worker to fit your requirement as opposed to expecting to show up in the equivalent of an Amazon Prime box, 2 days from now.
Yeah.
That is, I think we also bizarrely heard a little bit that people look at the very robust and well-established apprenticeship systems in Europe. And some people look at those rather superficially and say, oh, we should just do that. Completely unrealistic expectation. Or they say, that's way too complicated for us. We're never, if that's what an apprenticeship programs look like, we're never going to get there. Neither of those points of view is really based in the realities of what we can do in the United States.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, I mean, one thing I think we need to, I see that in the audience, there's a question about, when we're talking about apprentices and we're saying, it's building a skilled worker and we're talking about earning while learning, what are the various ways that employers pay apprentices? How should we think about that?
Yeah. Well, generally speaking, they pay apprentices in the European systems at a stipulated rate, which is below their full-time workers. They are being paid for part-time work. That's where some U.S. legislation and administrative law gets a little bit in the way, because if you're training somebody, do you have to pay them the minimum wage? If the minimum wage is increasing steeply, that, of course, and you do have to, that affects the relative economics of this. Another way that often young people get paid through apprenticeship programs, some kind of essentially expense support. It could be transport, so we give you a mass transit card, or in some instances, there's company provided pickup and drop off at school. But those things are fairly few and far between. The biggest thing, the biggest economic benefit to the student, to the learner, to the apprentice, goes beyond what they earn to what they've learned about work context. And also they have another thing that's invaluable as they go forward, even if they don't end up with a full-time job with the company that sponsored the apprenticeship, they have job experience.
Yeah.
So everything from going to an interview and saying, I interned, I was an apprentice, I'll just pick your firm as an example, at Accenture in the IT department,
Right.
That's huge credibility boost if a 19-year-old is saying that to a potential employer versus, I'd recently graduated from high school. I'm interested in computing, and I'm taking some courses at community college. And I'm really excited to get on, start my career. Those are all, perfectly fine sentiments. But when they're reinforced with that validation, that boy, this kid worked at Accenture, and do I think that they're going to program the Mars mission, on day one? No, but that says something to me about what they've been exposed to, and makes me more confident they'll be a good hire.
Yeah, it's interesting because thinking about apprentices at Accenture, it is an example of thinking about, or an example of an expansion for what an apprentice job would normally be, because oftentimes I've understood these as roles to be that are kind of craft roles, trade roles. You mentioned that as well. But in Accenture, we've looked at some of our work and the skills that we need to have a bit differently, and realize that there are jobs where apprenticeship not only benefits the person who's the apprentice, but benefits Accenture as well. So can you talk a little bit about what this underlying value proposition is for businesses? Because our audience here are all potential employers, and I'm sure have to be thinking about it from that lens.
Yep. I think there are several, and I think they're compelling. The first is 20 years ago, there were many more potential workers for jobs than there are today. The demographics of the U.S. workforce are changing. We're aging out. The dependency ratio is getting worse. There are just going to be fewer candidates. And getting engaged with a potential worker, introducing them to your workplace, and most importantly, giving them the type of experience you think you need them to have to be productive, is a way to avoid playing what's going to be an increasingly expensive spot market for labor. If your hiring strategy in the future is, when I need somebody, I'm going to post something on Indeed, and God bless. Well, I hope the Almighty does pay attention to your petitions, because it's not going to be as easy as it used to be. The second thing is that you're doing a rent-to-own model. You are not, we can't say I've ever done that, but I have taken test drives in cars, and I'm getting to know Mary Beth. I'm getting to know Joe. Do they fit in here? Do they have the type of attitude I'm looking for? Do they show capacity to learn, as opposed to three of us interviewed this person, they've got a community college degree, or they seem like a decent kid, we'll give it a shot. Also, apprentices are productive. It's not like you're paying them to sit around and sit in the coffee room.
Right.
Look at the history of workforce reductions in markets like Denmark, Austria, Switzerland, Singapore, when industries that do have to either curtail their hiring workforce, they never fire the apprentices, ever, because it's a good deal. And also it's your future. So, the economics of this are quite compelling. And I think one of the fallacies that affects a lot of companies in lots of areas of workforce development or workforce enablement, like their care benefits would be another illustration from a different category of what we study, is they're acutely aware of the cost, but they don't either think about or give credit to or really think through all the returns on that investment. Anything you look at as R is 0, I is a positive integer, that's going to be a bad deal. So you have to credit the returns to get an ROI that works. The ROI in apprenticeship is very strong, and that's putting aside softer benefits like a better community, having my workforce see that I'm committed to diversity and equity. Companies with apprenticeship programs very often report higher levels of engagement by their incumbent staff because they see that investments are being made in trying to both bring in young talent, but also to lift people up. And that's motivating for anyone to see.
Yeah, that's true. I'm looking at questions that have come in from the audience, and kind of along the same thread of the talent pipeline. Mm-hmm. What does the research show about apprenticeships and, you know, the correlation between that and an ability, companies' ability to increase their diversity, whether it's ethnic diversity, you know, racial diversity, gender,
yep.
bringing in more veterans, bringing women back to the workplace,
yep.
That have taken time off for motherhood.
Right. Well, the data on that is narrow, but it's very positive. And in the United States, why is it narrow? Because, you know, we have intense involvement of apprenticeships in 27 careers that are almost all building trades. So, but in terms of getting women and minorities into building trades, the construction trades have done a great job of doing that by design. And they're working with the employers that they represent to build more women into construction trades, more minorities into construction trades. And so because an apprenticeship program starts with going to what amounts to an unskilled pool and soliciting their interest and engaging them in learning, the employer has the ability to go to a pool of talent. It could be a school with a very heavy ethnic or racial mix. It could be to seek veterans or you know, a great opportunity for apprenticeship is for you know, second chance programs for offenders, where you have an adult that's coming out of the correction system that did not have the opportunity to gain the type of skills to get into decent employment. So lots of different ways to put these to work. Mary Beth, what have you done now? So, and may I just add one thing about the economics, which I neglected to say? Some of the most interesting apprenticeships I've seen, mostly just at a company level as opposed to a big industry level or regional level, are companies that have figured out that they can get someone to come in and do elements of a job that are underemployment and demotivating the people they currently employ. So I'll give you an example from a consumer products company. They've started bringing in apprenticeships, hiring out of community colleges for their marketing analysts. Their marketing analysts that they were hiring directly into the company were MBAs from leading schools, including the one I teach at. And what they were finding is that the job description called on those MBAs to do very routine road analyses that if they didn't already know how to do it when they arrived, they very quickly became dissatisfiers for those people. And when they had exit interviews with these people that they invested a lot of time in and effort in leaving, often they'd be saying, well, I'm spending half my time doing routine spreadsheets or routine product updates. And it's, you know, it's just, I'm not learning anything anymore. Well, having a bullpen of 3 or 4 apprentices in marketing analysis, who that type of work for, this is a prestigious company, I'm not at liberty to say which one, is what they're aspiring to. And you're taking a $130,000 person, levering them with a $45,000 person, and both of them are happy and engaged, as opposed to demotivating the $135,000 person and having more of them than you need because each of them is spending a half their time on work that a $45,000 person is excited to do and qualified to do.
So Joe, it looks like there's a fire alarm going off in the building.
who am I?
And so I'm going to kind of step in while, oh, Mary Beth's back off. Okay, Mary Beth.
Am I back on? Okay. Well, it turns out it was a false alarm on the 24th floor, but there was a lot of commotion in relaying that. So I apologize for that.
Well, you've got to pay attention to those things.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to, in just sort of summarizing some of the things we've heard, which I took some good notes because I love some of the phrases you had about building a skilled worker. So we're talking about ensuring that they're trained to the employer's specification, and so the employer gets the benefit of the time that they're learning, but also the employer gets the benefit of seeing if there's a fit, a personal fit, which I think is supremely important to all of us. You also kind of called it that rent-to-own model, which sort of addressed that. What are the underlying economics of this? We talked a good bit about the value proposition. Frankly, we're kind of talking about for society and for the community at large, of bringing in people that can be very, make great contributions to companies that at this point in time may not think they are a fit or may have hurdles in going through college in order to get that 4-year degree to do something that may not necessarily require the 4-year degree. And then I think that, the last thing that you had mentioned that, I think all of us understand is that chicken and egg of how do I get a job if I don't have experience, how do I get experience to then, to then get the job?
That's becoming a much worse problem, because if technology accelerates and gets more present in most jobs, the only way you can get access to what you need to know is to have the job. So it's a very perverse effect, but I noticed some of the sponsors are several of the best community colleges in the United States. Houston's got some great ones, but it's really hard for skills providers, whether they're a high school system, the voc ed program, a community college, to keep up to state of the art with the velocity being so high and often the technology being more and more expensive. And so we're getting this perverse effect where if you can't, it's harder if you've been out of the job for a year or two, or you've never had a job, the likelihood that you've been trained up on the technology you're actually going to be confronting is dropping fast. So that leaves the employer looking exclusively for people who had the job before. And that gets really competitive because I've got to outbid everyone else who's looking for the same person. And if I happen to be, let's say, a newer company, a company in a location that the type of talent I'm looking for doesn't necessarily put on the top of their list of places to live, if I'm not in the industry with the most current popular appeal, and I'm competing for those same folks who've got digital skills, you're way better off finding someone local who's excited to work for your company and training them up than you are going toe-to-toe in the spot market for labor for that same talent.
Sure. Well, Joe, this has been really interesting. I thank you for being here today. I know you continue to do great research on other topics. We'll have to have you back to hear more about those.
Thank you.
It's really been a pleasure having you here, and we appreciate talking about that report and apprentices as we focus more on that here in Houston. So now I'd like to bring in my friend Dawn Spreeman-Heine. She's a managing director at Aon Insurance Services. Accenture and Aon are working together to launch the Greater Houston Apprenticeship Network. I'd like Dawn to come sort of introduce that to us now. Dawn?
Thanks, Mary Beth, and thank you, Joe, as well. I'm Dawn Spreeman-Heine, and I'm with Aon. This topic is so timely for all of us, so we really appreciate all your comments, Joe, and the great questions. With all the workforce issues going on we're facing today, it's just a really timely topic. We've got more open positions out in the market than qualified applicants to fill them. Many of us, almost all of us, probably feel this pain every day. We've got job loss, career disruption due to the pandemic, and a movement to improve diversity within our organizations and within our world. We've heard today, about the effects of degree inflation, limiting employers' access to talent, and all the disruption going on today. in almost every industry due to digitization, technology, globalization. We know these changes really have disrupted our traditional approaches to finding and hiring and developing great talent. We think all of this brings a great opportunity for the Greater Houston workforce, which is packed with potential talent. It's a great city. There's a lot of talent here that's untapped. So this is why Mary Beth and I are so excited to announce today the creation of the Greater Houston Apprentice Network, powered by Aon and Accenture. Accenture, Aon, and Zurich Insurance, excuse me, led the creation of the Chicago Apprentice Network 4 years ago.
I think we may have lost Dawn.
Did we lose Dawn?
It looks like it. And Mary Beth, I don't know if you want to add anything to it, but I think, Accenture has been quite the leader in this space to get these types of apprenticeship networks started. And I know your CEO, Julie Sweet, is very passionate about this. And so I don't know if you want to add anything to that in terms of what's coming here, because I think it's exciting.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think Dawn covered a lot of the points, but this apprenticeship model we have proven out in our business and with Aon and other cities, bringing in other companies and really making a material impact on it in those cities. And we want to bring this to Houston. So we will launch the network in July. Following this program, we'll send you more information, or you'll be part of the distribution list so you can get more information. And the idea is just to have, a coalition of sort of like-minded companies, is what I would say, around this topic of apprenticeship that would like to start that at their companies. And we'll be leveraging the successes, the playbooks we have, all those kinds of things that we've done to bring it to life in our companies for the benefit of others that want to join us. I think that about covers it, Peter.
And I'm going to ask Joe to join back in because there was one final question I think Dawn had for him. Joe? Dawn, are you back with us?
Dawn seems to be going in and out.
Yeah. So Joe, I think one of the questions we had was, as we get ready to launch this opportunity, what would be your advice as we, go down this path? Because obviously we have kind of the strong kind of traditional apprenticeship programs, but here's an opportunity to boost and expand them.
Well, first of all, I'm really excited about this. I was gratified to be invited at this kind of launch event. The first thing I would say is that it takes learning on both sides part to make this work. And so I genuinely believe that companies that invest the time and effort to figure out how to make an apprenticeship program work in their four walls of their enterprise will have an attractive ROI on that eventually. And not in 10 years and not in 8 years, but it's not something which you are going to know how to do right off the bat. You will often have to revisit policies. So, for example, for high school-based apprenticeships, a lot of big multinationals have a policy that says, we do not employ anybody under the age of 18 in the company for any reason. So I could be the Houston branch of a global company and headquarters HR says, I can't do this. So you're going to bump into barriers like that. You've got to get your workforce trained up into how to handle this. And they've got, and you'll be surprised how quickly people raise their hands and want to be involved in this. But it takes you've got to make the workplace ready and amenable. And you've got to remember you're dealing with 17, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds, many of whom are in their first sustained work experience. And if they're viewed as learners and students and young professionals is what they call them in Switzerland, emphasis on young, and you bring that mindset to cultivating their skills, you're going to get rewarded. If you expect them to be someone who is going to get trained up in 2 weeks and act like a 5-year veteran, you're going to be disappointed. So you're onboarding a new strategic vendor. How would you think about that in your workplace? It's not, I'm just hiring a different type of person and using the same old system.
Oh, that's helpful. Dawn, any final questions before we kind of close things out?
Absolutely. So just want to share with everybody, sorry about that. I don't know what's going on here, but we really are inviting employers to join this network with us. And these are employers who want to open the door to a rich, untapped talent pool that's available here. And by accessing this network and our apprenticeship playbook, we can help your organization launch their own apprentice program. This is a tried and true model, and it's scalable for your organization. And you really don't have to start from scratch. We've got 4 years of experience with this. So, we can help define your vision for your own program. And who are your leadership stakeholders? What are your goals? What do you want to offer? Are there metrics or ROIs available for consideration? Yes, there are. I learned today on the launch event for the Minneapolis Apprentice Network that employers report for every dollar they spend, they receive about $1.50 in value, which is really encouraging. So, there's help available to help identify those roles within your organization that are ripe for apprenticeships, certainly looking by industry. So that's what's available if you join. So today is the meeting, first of 2 installment meetings. I think you were mentioning when I was down that we have a big launch event in July. So there, you'll hear from city and county and state officials and workforce leaders, all aiming to create new pathways for apprentices here in Houston. And you'll hear from corporate CEOs and employers who've got successful apprenticeship programs who will share their experience. And best of all, which I think is really great, is you get to hear from actual apprentices and hear their stories about how gaining access to their new role has opened the door to their education and a life-changing, family-sustaining career, one that was really not possible for them in the past. So we promise if you join us in July, you'll be really inspired. I think that might be it for me, Peter.
So thanks, Dawn, and thanks, Mary Beth. I really appreciate your leadership in this. And, I think, Joe, one of the big takeaways I've taken, and particularly with some of the discussion that we've seen here, is there's still a critical role to get employers to buy in and lead in a different way. But there's also a lot of probably really strong infrastructure that exists in the region that we're going to have to tap. The community colleges have been doing apprenticeships with, some employers and have a network, and that's coordinating everything. So it feels like it's got, before we kind of end, you've always kind of pushed this thing, which is the employers have to buy in at the very beginning and feel like, they're part of the ownership. And I really took away from this final piece that you also have to prepare your organization because it requires a different kind of management. So am I missing anything?
I think those are very, very important. And you're cultivating human assets for the future. Treat it like an asset. Invest in it, install it, understand how to work with it. Don't treat it like an expense.
So once again, Mary Beth, Dawn, you have been great partners. We're looking forward to the launch of this. And Joe, as you know, I'd like to offer my personal thanks to you. And of course, I know I appreciate our friendship. And I recall fondly that in October of 2019, you were here in Houston, engaging with us and providing great insights. And so it's always a pleasure to have you join us and be a part of kind of what's going on here in Houston, but we also appreciate all the good work that you do in the Managing the Future of Work effort. And we know that you're probably updating the data in this report. And so we look forward to hearing some of that as well.
We're looking forward to doing that. And I want all of you to know that when municipalities ask me who they should look to as a role model, I often talk about GHP and the great boosterism of employers there, the excellent communication relationship with some community colleges in the city. And I know you all are very aware to the degree that your glass is half empty, but it's also half full. You've got further initiatives like this that are going to be role models for others.
And so once again, I want to thank our audience for participating today in today's UpSkill Works Forum. And of course, I want to say a big thank you to our UpSkill Works Forum sponsors. In the coming months, we'll continue the dialogue. Obviously, there'll be an apprenticeship piece, but we'll continue to bring new ideas and leaders to the table to help us understand and strengthen our workforce. So thank you all for being here. Have a great day.